My name is Parveen, and I work as a senior lecturer at University of Sheffield. So these a series of webinars I started off to with an aim to help people in Pakistan to understand research or any other nursing academia related questions which people have and which people would like to develop themselves further about. So this is the second webinar which was requested to be about writing for publications, and I'm really grateful for Sir Faraz Masih, Ehtisham Yunus, and Professor Roger Watson for joining us today in this webinar. So the order of the webinar is that each speaker will have around 8 minutes to talk about, except Roger, who will have a little longer time. And then we can have questions. So we are going to talk about tips about writing for publications. We would like to tackle issues around predatory publishers and what we need to understand about predatory publishers. Because there are colleagues joining from other can everyone please mute yourself? Thank you. So because we have got colleagues who may not be able to understand Urdu, so it will all will be in English. But if you have a question and if you would like to write in Urdu or ask in Urdu, please don't worry, just keep a note and we will come back to you once the presentations are over. We may be able to take maybe 1 or 2 questions after each talk, but I think it would make sense to have all those questions at the end. So if you have typed your questions in chat box, we will take it from there. So again, thank you so much for coming. So our first speaker is Sir Faraz Masih. Sir Faraz is working at Dow University of Health Sciences. And Sir Faraz, you're working as an assistant professor there, isn't it? Just give a little bit of your introduction and over to you. So Faraz is going to talk about tips for writing for publications, and I hope you all find it useful. Everybody is muted, so those who would like to speak can mute themselves. So Sir Faraz, this time you can only mute yourself. Everybody else, please make sure that once you enter into the room, you mute yourself so that the voice doesn't go to other people. Thank you.
So, thank you, Dr. Parveen, for my introductions. I'm honored to be part of this panel for this webinars and try to be share about the few tips for writing manuscript for publication for the research perspectives. I'm Sir Faraz Masih, Assistant Professor and MSN Program Coordinator at Dow University of Health Sciences, Karachi, Pakistan. So, I'm going to speak on the tips for writing manuscript for publication. What the information I'm going to share, this has been taken or gathered from the different perspectives that has gone written by the reviewers from who have worked in the different journals internationally. One of them is Angel Bojra, who has written 2014. He has been working, contributing over more than 300 scientific contribution, and half of them are the international peer reviewed. And he has been contributing 45 to 50 scientific contribution each year. And more than, he has worked in more than 50 journals as reviewers. So different information has been gathered that I'm going to share with you all today. There are 6 main tips that I'm sharing as a guideline for writing manuscript for publications. One of them is think before what we want to publish our work as a researchers. Secondly, we are supposed to decide what type of the manuscript to write. And third tip is choose the target journal. And fourth one, pay attention to journal requirement, it means guideline for authors. And second last tip for the day is pay attention to the structure of the manuscript. And lastly, understanding ethical perspective to be considered to avoid ethical violation. So these are the 6 points I'm going to share as a guideline for manuscript writing. When we go for the first one, think about why you as a researcher want to publish your work or whether it's a publisher. It's very interesting. It's not only to complete your research and then start thinking for the writing manuscript. It's important. It should be conceptualized at the starting. when we are going to start our research. For example, we are going to be plan our hypothesis and which are the different design. So at that time, we are supposed to be think for writing manuscript for publications. Different questions are being need to be asked or considered at this level. Have I done something new and interesting? Is there anything changing in my work? Is my work directly related to current hot topic of the day? Have I contributed solution to significant problem in different perspective? If answer of this question is yes, then manuscript can be prepared and submitted to the high impact factor internationally. If the answer is no, so it can be published in the local journals or with the low impact in international journals. Regarding these questions, we are supposed to be consider reviewer perspectives. So what they think as a writer, as the author, we are supposed to be consider why writing manuscript for publication. The reviewer think like that. Does the paper contain sufficient new material? Is the topic within the scope of journal? It means the readership. Could be the clinical, research, the education, or something else. This is very important to think. Is manuscript is presented concisely and well organized? Are the method and experiment presented in the way that can be replicated somewhere? Are the results presented adequately? Is the discussion relevant, concise, and well documented? Are the conclusions supported by the data presented? Is the language acceptable? Are the figure and table adequately and well designed? And all the reference that has been cited in the manuscript are a part of the reference list. So these are the questions we should consider as a author for writing manuscript regarding thinking why we need to publish our work. Second tip of the day, your second guideline for the writing manuscript is decide what type of the manuscript we are supposed to write. There are different types. It could be full article or original research article. It can be peer review article or a case report or something else could be. But let's think about the research article. If we're thinking, then we have to evaluate in the different perspective. First one, we should evaluate as a self-evaluators. Is the sufficient for a full article or material is this? This can benefit the readership. And we should also engage our supervisor team if we are engaged at the master's or PhD thesis or dissertation level. We can take review feedback from them. Don't forget to take feedback from some of the expert who is not part of the supervisory team during the thesis at the master or PhD level. By this, prepare one manuscript and submit, but it should not be part of the series of manuscript at one time. Moving toward the third point of the as a guideline is choosing the target journal. Different questions come in mind, but the most common question, how to select and write journals for publication. One tip, we should not gamble by scattering our manuscript in many journals at one time. Prepare manuscript and submit in one journal and wait for response. And secondly, we are supposed to be refer the reference that we have cited in our manuscript, in our studies, refer those journals where they have been published. Read the guidelines and try to read from them. This is the chances to be accepted in that level. And one more tip for selecting journal is read the 2 or 3 recent articles published in those journals. If we go for that, this will be helpful for selecting a journal for our manuscript. Moving toward the fourth tip of the day is pay attention to guideline for the author according to journal. It's very important to visit the website where we're supposed to be publish our manuscript, browse and download the guidelines and print out and please read again and again. This helps us to detail editorial guidelines, submission process, fees for publication, copyright and ethical perspective. This also helps us the manuscript perspectives. This helps us using the proper text layout, reference citation, nomenclature, figures and tables. So these are different things that help guide us through the authorship guidelines. We must know it's very important to prepare manuscript in that way that we should not waste the time of the reviewer and editor of the journals. That we need, these are things that we need to be considered while paying attention to the requirement as the authorship guidelines. Second last guideline of the day is pay attention to structure of the manuscript. This is a key point. The different journals have the different guidelines, but overall these are the common three section has been lined in the many journals. First section consider as this should be well designed, have the full of information and should be written attractively, because that's the indexes and search while through the search Google Scholar so many search strategies. The first section should include title of this manuscript, author's detail and affiliation organizations, abstract and the keyword. These are the perspective where the manuscript is being searched or indexes. So this need to be checked out very properly and carefully. Second section is considered as the main section or main content of the manuscript. That should consider as a introduction, methodology, result, discussions, and conclusion. Introduction said, why did we work for that? Methodology, how it was carried out. Result, what was the finding? And discussion, what is the meaning of those findings, moving toward the conclusion. So these should be aligned very carefully. And the third section of the structure is, that could be acknowledgement, reference, supplementary material, or annexes. These should be attached very carefully and properly. So these are the key points regarding the paying consideration regarding the structure of the manuscript for the writing for publication. The last guideline or tip of the day is understanding publication ethics to avoid violation. We do understand all plagiarism is the policy and this should be ethically approved from one of the university or organizations, and always try to be this abiding by the ethical policies. This is very important for us professional and legally protections. So always try to be read carefully ethical policy of the journal and try to implement while writing manuscript for publication. So these are the 6 points that I'm shared with you guys today. In moving toward the ending and closing point that we have to consider. We should think like that. We should cherish our work as the author. If you don't think this is important, why journal should think? We should follow the simple rules with hardship and hard working and dedication for writing manuscript. And last point, editor and review are scientists who are busy in their work like you guys. So therefore, we should try to structure our manuscript and apply all the tips and guidelines for writing manuscript for saving time for our editors and reviewers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarfraz. Thank you ever so much. I think some people are having problems with listening. So if when speakers are speaking, please check the microphone or setting of your voice. And if anyone is having problem, please just drop a note and we'll see. So Sarfraz, thank you so much for very useful tips. It is very, very important to make sure that, you know, the kind of things that you've talked about, select your journal first, read the guidelines, make sure that you know, what the information is presented clearly, as you have said. And I think many people everywhere in the world that we see as editors, and Roger will be able to talk about it a lot more, you know, he can tell you a lot more than myself, is that people don't seem to read instruction. They don't seem to pay attention to the instructions, including ourselves. So that means that it delays in the into the process, and sometimes when you submitted manuscripts, they are just given back to you because you're not following the guidelines. So thank you so much for that, and we will come back to questions later. I'm just conscious of the time. So Ehtisham, if you can please unmute yourself. Ehtisham is a PhD student in Canada, and he will be able to tell you a little bit more about his PhD and the university. And he's going to talk about why people do get attracted to predatory publishers, especially in the context of everywhere in the world, and because a lot of our audience are from Pakistan, so many people, many researchers do get attracted and do not to predatory publishers, do not realize the distinction between that. So he's going to pose some questions which hopefully Roger will be able to answer in his talk later on. So Ehtisham, over to you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me clearly?
Yeah. Can someone type into the chat box and say if you can hear now? Okay.
Thank you so much for making me part of this presentation and this webinar. So I'll just based on my limited experience of publishing and what I've learned from other colleagues, I'll share 4 major points why people choose predatory journals. So I think the first point is limited knowledge about reputable and predatory publishers and the publishing process. People have a difficulty in identifying predatory journals. So when we talk about predatory journals, they usually send you all sorts of fancy emails. There are sweet talks involved in these emails, and early career researchers, people who do not have a lot of knowledge about publishing, they usually feel valued when they read those sort of emails. So they usually submit to these journals. That's one of the common reasons why people probably choose predatory journals. And then there are a lot of misconceptions that people have about international journals. That again goes back to the same point of limited knowledge about predatory journals. So I think some of the common misconceptions that people have is editors and reviewers are biased against researchers from the developing countries. I personally have those experiences. Sometimes I would submit a manuscript to the most high impact journal in nursing, and they would probably reject my paper within a week, and I'll assume maybe I wasn't worth publishing in that journal. I'm not worth. But what happens is your manuscripts are not really evaluated based on where are you from. It's evaluated based on the quality of the study or the aims and scope of the journal, as some of the points have already been mentioned by Sarfaraz. And then the second thing, the misconception that people have is the high international publication fee. They assume, I've talked to a lot of people from Pakistan, some of them would say that they do not publish in international journals because these journals charge a lot of publication fees. It's because people do not have knowledge about green open access and the subscription-based publications. Usually when you publish in international journals, they do not charge you fee if you want to keep your article subscription-based. If you want in open access, then probably they're going to charge you fee. The third misconception that people has is editors and reviewers not going to be supportive of people or the papers which are submitted from developing countries. It usually happens because if the data are collected from a remote area and it has little relevance for people across the world, and you haven't really framed your manuscript to inform something for the global nursing community, then probably there are chances that the international journal is going to reject those papers. But people, they take these issues somewhat personally, and they assume that their papers were rejected because the editors weren't supportive of data from their country. And then there is fear of rejection that people have. That's the second common reason people chose predatory journals. In order to publish in high impact international journals, you need high quality English language skills, and you need to frame the manuscript according to the journal guidelines. And you need to keep in mind that it's an international journal and people from across the world would be reading your paper. So if you won't really pay attention to the international relevance of your paper, then there is a high chance that your paper is going to be rejected from an international journal. So people, instead of paying attention on their English language skill, they usually spend more time on choosing a journal which is predatory. That could lead to that's probably another reason for publishing in predatory journal. And then consistent rejections from high profile journals can lead researchers to publish in predatory journals. If one of the paper was rejected 10 or 12 times from international journals, people might think, well, I just need a quick turnaround now. I can't face more rejection. I need to just submit it to somebody who's gonna just accept my paper right away. And that leads to the next point of quick turnaround time. People want their manuscript to be published in short time. I had conversation with some of the colleagues in Pakistan, and they had they conducted studies and they wanted it to be published. And the first comment that I usually get from them is we want to publish it as soon as possible. because the sooner we publish, the sooner we'll get the promotion, or the sooner we'll become the assistant professor. Because in Pakistan, this is the requirement. In order to become an assistant professor, you'll probably need at least 2 publications. So people only go for the number of publication. It doesn't matter what's the quality of the paper is. It doesn't matter if it's contributing anything to the global community. They just want publication. So publication is there for the sake of publication. So that's another reason. And then there's a pressure to build reputation in the department. For instance, like I had this personal experience with one of the colleagues. So this was an interesting case for me too. So the person that I was in contact with, I had a long affiliation with that person, and we contributed a couple of manuscripts to the international journals. So this person, although didn't have a lot of knowledge about predatory journals, this person wanted me to help them publish the paper. So I just offered like I suggested some of the top journals that could be relevant to their paper. But the co-author of that paper, I wasn't an author of that paper. So the co-author of that paper wanted to publish the paper as soon as possible, because like that person had only 3 or 4 months to get tenured or become an assistant professor. So without telling the person that I was in contact with, the third person published that paper in a predatory journal just to get it published and like get the promotion. And the person got the promotion, but the paper would never be read by anyone. So that's the way of like people usually publish in predatory journal because they are trying to build a reputation in their department. They feel like probably that particular person have already published 10 papers and I'm like only at 2. So maybe I need to get going and start publishing as soon as possible. They don't think really about their reputation. They just go on like, well, I need to just publish and like build my reputation in the department. People will know me as a researcher, like I'm the top person who have published like a lot of paper in the international journal. So that sort of like assumptions make people to publish in predatory journals. And so I've already discussed 2 reasons. One is limited knowledge of the predatory journals and the legitimate journals, greater pressure to publish, which includes need for publication promotion, seeking quick turnaround time, pressure to build reputation in the department. And then the third one is fear of rejection from international journals. I've talked about that. The fourth point that I think is more relevant to the Pakistani context is the limited guidance from research mentors. Most of the research mentors that I've known, like in Pakistan, like we don't have a lot of PhD prepared nurses. So master's prepared nurses are also serving as research mentors, but these master's prepared mentors would have published in predatory journals. So their students or their colleagues, they would follow their lead and they would go for the same journals, which is not a good idea, but that's how they end up in predatory journal. And some of these mentors do not have like adequate knowledge of the publishing. They can't really guide their junior mentors, junior colleagues. So if people do not have knowledge about predatory and the legitimate journals, that they can't really guide others where they should be publishing. I think those are the reasons that I could just speculate based on my discussions with Pakistani nurses. I can't think of any more reasons because some of these are pretty interconnected and interrelated. But if you have questions, and probably Professor Watson would be able to share a lot about this because like he might have like a lot of experiences of, and he's been conducting workshops. So I'll just like end my session here. So feel free to ask any questions if you have. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Ehtisham, and I think you've also covered very important points, which are not only related to what people not only related to people in Pakistan, but we see that all across the world, and it's very difficult to distinguish also the predatory journals as well as the normal journals. So it's quite hard to identify. Differentiate between them, and it's really important to ask each other when it comes to that point. So I'll hand over to Professor Roger Watson now, and he will be able to talk about give us advice about predatory journals, what they are, and you know how to not to fall in for that. Those of you who don't know, I can tell you Professor Roger Watson works as a professor of nursing at University of Hull. He is editor-in-chief of Journal of Advanced Nursing, as well as Nursing Open. Both of them are journals published by Wiley, and I have known Professor Watson for more than 10 years. Actually, I'm the one who is giving him headache for past 10 years. So over to you, Roger.
Thank you very much, Parveen. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay, good. Well, to my friends from Pakistan, salam alaikum, and buongiorno to Monica from Switzerland, and hello to colleagues from Saudi I see on here. I think I know the people from Saudi too. So,
and there are some from Italy as well.
Italy, yeah, Italy. Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I've said hello in Italian, so I've covered that. I don't know any other language. Right. Some background noise there. Okay, so I'm going to use a PowerPoint, and I'm going to try to speak fairly slowly because I have a different accent from other people. So if you have any difficulty in understanding or following me, just say, let Parveen know, and she will summarize for our Pakistani colleagues. I can't help, well, Monica knows my accent very well, so everyone else will be able to understand me. I think our Saudi colleagues are both English. Now, I've just got to set up a PowerPoint and share the screen. How do I do that, Parveen? Just share. Oh,
so if you hover over it, it will, the small green thing which says share screen.
Oh, it's very obvious, yeah. Host disabled screen sharing.
Oh, sorry, just a sec.
Great display of technical mastery here.
You know me.
Let me know when that happens, because I just wanted to say that both those previous presentations were excellent, and I think that's been a great introduction to predatory publishing. It's almost like we planned it. It's good.
Do you want to check now?
Yeah, that's fine. Share, and then if I do that, can everyone see that? Yeah, okay, yeah. Good. Just let me know, Parveen, if anything goes wrong. Okay, thank you for the introduction, Parveen. I'm, as Parveen said, I'm the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Advanced Nursing. I'm also the editor of Nursing Open, and I have the, oops, that's the, for some reason my slides are moving automatically. I'll try and stop that happening. I'm also the editor of Nursing Open, on which I work with Parveen. And Nursing Open is an open access journal, but it's one of the legitimate ones. I think there's often confusion about open access and the issue of predatory journals, but I can talk about that later or answer any questions that people have. And those of you who are on Twitter, you're welcome to follow both journals. Right. This is an email I got from, sorry, the picture there is of the Predator from the film Predator, rather horrible picture. But this is an email I received from a colleague in Saudi, and I'll read it out. I've changed the names a little bit of the journal just in case I get taken to court. But someone wrote to me and said, I'm writing to seek for advice for my friend. He was the victim of a hijacked journal. Hijacked journals are very similar to predatory. The name of the journal he gave me, and he paid $600 as an APC, that's a fee, an article processing charge. He later learned that it was hijacked or predatory. And anyway, he was asking if I could help him and was there anything he could do about this. And the problem is there is absolutely nothing you can do about this. I think it's well worth pointing out right now that predatory and hijacked journal activity is fraudulent and probably criminal activity. And if you pay a fee, two things have happened. You've paid money for an article that may never appear. If it does appear, it will be in a very low quality journal. And just be aware that you will have given your credit card details to some very undesirable people. So don't be surprised if your bank account is emptied of all its money after this. It's very serious. You really do have to be very careful. I believe this is an article that I wrote 3 years ago in the Times Higher Education newspaper in the UK. And I actually believe that publishing in fraudulent journals is a criminal activity. And it's also a criminal and fraudulent activity if academics knowingly take part in it. That was the point of this article. And I think that if people, as our previous speaker said, should be aware of it. People often publish out of impatience or wanting to boost their CV or going for a promotion, but they mustn't ever be tempted to do this. And essentially, the issue of predatory publishers to me is really like pollution. They've invaded and polluted the whole area of academic publishing, and we really must do everything we can to avoid them. And also, as editors and publishers, we've got to do what we can to try and stop them, although it's going to be very difficult. The only thing that will ultimately stop predatory publishers is if we all stop sending them articles, but that's a long way away, I think. So it's a very serious issue, and some universities around the world are taking action against colleagues and members of staff who publish in academic journals, which are in predatory journals. So you've got to be careful. Ultimately, when people become more aware of this, it could affect your career adversely. So do be aware, do be careful. And what I really want to do is add to what the previous speaker said and add more of a warning, and then at the end try to help you to know how to avoid the predatory publishers. Now, this is from a website 4 years ago. This particular website has now been taken down. But it no longer exists from that date, unfortunately. But this was a man in the United States called Jeffrey Beal, and he followed the rise of predatory publishers and predatory journals. And you can see over a very, predatory publishers arose around 2010. They're a very recent phenomenon, about a decade old, 10 years old. And you can see the incredible rise of predatory publishers over a 5-year period there, from just out of single figures up to nearly 1,000. I don't know how many predatory publishers there are now. The next slide shows the number of predatory journals that he was able to identify in an even shorter period of time, and again, a similar pattern. Now, we're now in 2020, which is 4 years beyond this, and to be absolutely honest, nobody knows exactly how many predatory journals there are in the world, but there are some people who reckon that it could be in the hundreds of thousands. And as our previous speaker pointed out, those of you who've published will be bombarded every day with emails issuing greetings, asking about your health, and inviting you to publish in a journal which may or may not be anything to do with your field. I'm a nurse, and I'm regularly asked to publish in engineering or chemical journals. They're very non-specific, but they send out all these emails on a daily basis, and again, there is nothing you can do about it. Unfortunately, you cannot block them, and you should never, ever respond to them in any way at all. They assume a response is positive, and they just keep chasing you. So it's a big problem. And I mentioned at the beginning the issue of hijacked websites. Now, these are similar, it's a similar criminal operation to predatory journals, but it's a little bit different, and you've got to be aware of this too. A hijacked journal is one where a company, a fraudulent company, has recreated a website that looks like a legitimate journal, looks identical, and the domain name looks very similar, but usually isn't exactly the same. And the difference here is that for a green open access journal or a non-open access journal where you don't have to pay to publish, at some point in the process of submitting to a hijacked journal, you will be asked to part with money. And going back to my first PowerPoint, that amount of money can be quite big. You've lost your money, and you may lose all the money from your bank account as a result of that, because you've given away your credit card details or your bank account details in order for them to take the money. So I can't emphasize enough. This particular man here, Dr. Medra Jalalian from Iran, is one of the leading experts in the world on hijacked journal websites. He's worth following. So I could say a lot more about them. I don't want to just go into too many details. I'm sure that people are worried as a result of this. I would emphasize, don't be too worried. It's actually relatively easy to avoid predatory journals. There are some simple rules that you can follow. And in order not to worry people too much, I'm just going to go through some of these now. First of all, if you're concerned about a journal, think, check, and submit. The first thing to think about is, has this journal invited me to submit a manuscript? If a journal's inviting you to submit a manuscript, you should always be suspicious. A journal like the Journal of Advanced Nursing or Nursing Open or any other reputable academic journal will never issue invitations or general invitations to submit. They may issue requests for papers for special issues, but they will come from someone you probably know. They may send out adverts about their journal, but they will never trawl for papers in the way that a predatory journal does. And I think the best thing to do when you get any invitation to submit a paper is just to delete that email, even if you think that it may be legitimate. You should always be in control of where you're going to submit. And as our first speaker, Dr. Massey, made an excellent point, choose your journal, check the website, and look at the guidelines and take it from there. And you simply can't go wrong if you take that approach to academic publishing. So if you get to any point in that process, then you should check. If you're worried at all, you should check. Check the domain name, check who the names of the editors are, check what the email for the journal is. If you know somebody who works for the journal, check with them, is this really your journal? Always check if you're in any doubt at all. Nobody else can do this for you. You've got to take responsibility yourself. And only if you've thought about it and checked everything that you can, should you then feel free to submit. You're probably safe to submit then. But the sort of things that you can check are the following. If you're concerned about a journal, I would check on the various reputable databases that exist. There are many of these. I'm going to give some examples here. It's not a complete list, but check things like Medline. Is the journal listed on Medline? If it is, then you're safe. If it isn't listed on Medline, that doesn't mean to say that it's predatory, but if it is listed there, then you're safe. If it's listed on PubMed, which is slightly more journals on there than Medline, then you're safe, because these journals have to be vetted to be included. Is it included on the Clarivate impact factor list? If it is, then it's a reputable journal. Likewise, the Emerging Sources Citation Index, which is run by Clarivate, if it's listed there, it's met quality criteria. Likewise, Scopus. And finally, there is a directory of open access journals. Not every journal that's open access is on there, but if it's on there, then it has met some basic criteria. The criteria being it's got an international editorial board, it's got a peer review process, and it charges you money to publish only after the editorial process is complete. So that's another thing to check. If you come across a journal that is open access and you think it's predatory, do check the point at which the fees are submitted. You should only pay money after review and acceptance, never pay at the point of submitting the article. And as editors of an open access journal, Parveen and I have nothing to do whatsoever with the money. That's handled by the publishers. We're completely separated from that, and we only deal with the editing process. Also check that the journal publishes under Creative Commons licenses. There are many of these. If a journal is open access, in fact, any open access journal that's reputable should publish under a Creative Commons license. It can't do this unless it's reputable. So if there's no mention of Creative Commons licenses, then the journal is likely to be predatory. And here's a checklist, finally, other things to look out for. Has the publisher started dozens of new open access titles all at once? That's often a sign that this is a predatory journal. It's not absolutely the case that all publishers are predatory if they've got lots of open access journals, but Hindawi, for example, is a reputable publisher, but they do have lots of open access titles. But you do have to check carefully. If you look at any published journals, are there very few papers, if any? Sometimes there are journals with no papers. Do they send emails asking for manuscripts? I've already asked. I've already mentioned that. Or do they ask you to serve on the editorial board? You shouldn't respond to that. You would be invited specifically by an editor to do that. Also, can you trace the people who work on the journal? Are these disclosed or are they anonymous? Is the publisher's address not verifiable? You can look this up. Most predatory publishers claim to have an address in Washington, D.C. in the United States because it sounds prestigious, but most of these are post restants or paid for addresses. They're not real places. You won't find them on Google Earth, for example. And also, of course, the bottom line in a way is there evidence of peer review? If they're offering to publish your paper rapidly or within a week or something like that, then they have to be a predatory publisher, because the peer review process takes weeks to complete, as anybody who's published or edited knows. So if they're offering rapid routes to publication, that's a sure sign that the journal is predatory. I'm going to finish there, so thank you very much for the opportunity, and again, thank you very much for organising this. I'm happy to take questions when the next speaker is finished. That's my email if anybody wants to contact me, and if you really have got nothing whatsoever to do, you can follow me on Twitter. Thanks very much. I'll try and stop sharing the screen now. So stop share. There we go, I'm back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roger. And I think that was really useful. So we are happy to take questions if people have any. You can pose your questions by writing into the chat box, or you can, if you hover over it, there is a small thing which says reaction, or if you hover over your name and click more, no, it's not more. So if you, I think there is some point somewhere where you can raise your hands. There are so many online platforms these days that you can start mixing up and you don't know which one is it. But somehow if you indicate that you would like to ask a question, you could use your mic to ask a question, or you could just write on the chat box. So what I'm going to do is go through at the start of the chat and see if there are any questions. In the meantime, Sarfaraz or Ehtisham, do you have any questions that you would like to ask Roger, or any clarifications while I'm looking into this?
I would actually have a question. I have a question for Dr. Watson. One of the points that I mentioned is, like, I've often heard from people that they think that international publishers are biased towards authors from developing countries. So could you clarify that a little bit so that people would know that it's not the case, or if it's the case?
Yeah, thank you. I think it can often, it's a really good question, and one that I do get asked a lot. I think it can often appear that we're biased against maybe non-English speaking and developing countries, but honestly, I think it's to do with the quality of the work that comes in. And as you rightly pointed out, we don't look to see where a paper comes from. We don't even look to see who's writing it, to be honest. We don't look for qualifications or position. We really do look at papers in their own right and look at them for their own merits. But one of the problems from many papers, and you made this point yourself, is that they don't have an international perspective. And for the leading international academic journals, what they want to see is a paper that, even if it's done locally in one place, that the implications for the rest of the world, or the rest of that area or something like that are made clear, you know. So I think people have got to think a little bit outside of their area. And I'm just thinking of an example, using Saudi colleagues there. I often get papers that come from Saudi Arabia, for example, a Saudi perspective on whatever, or a study of type 1 diabetes in Saudi children, or something like that. But I know from working in those areas that many of these issues are relevant to the whole of the Middle East, for example. And if they can bring that perspective into it, that immediately makes it more interesting. So I think it's just trying to think, outside of your own area, and who else would benefit from this. And what one trick is, try not. Some journals ask you to do it, but we ask you not to do it. We ask you not to put the country in the title of the paper, because that's immediately flags up it's very narrow.
Thank you.
Long answer to a short question. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir Fraz, do you have any question?
Yeah. Dr. Roger, one perspective people go toward the predatory genre is they think they are not, their English is not their native language.
Yeah.
And they think might be the English is not up to mark, just like the Western word requirement of the journals. Yeah. So what are the tips you are giving to the researchers from those countries where the English is not native language?
Yeah, okay, a really excellent question. Again, you made this point yourself that we publish, most of academic publishing is in English, and the English has got to be good. And I'm afraid that we really don't make any allowances for this. It is very, all of the publishers will offer an English language service, but that I can assure you is very, very expensive to do, very expensive to use. But that's one service that they do offer. You can also find someone locally, perhaps, to help you. But I would always urge people, whatever help they get, is to find a native English speaker, not a local translator, because the idioms and the ways we express things sometimes aren't correct. And so I think it's finding a native English speaker, and always having your paper, read at some point by a native English speaker. Even if you have a local translator to work on it, even if you are fluent in English, as you clearly are, you'll never be as good as a native English speaker. So I think that's worth doing. And the other thing to do is to find a friendly academic in another country whose native first language is English, and ask them to have a look at it. Somebody who you know and trust, and who will do it for very little, or do it for nothing, and just ask them to have a read through the paper quickly, and not to be too worried about the science, but just to see if they understand what is being said in the paper. So, as I say, it is a problem, and it's got to be addressed. And we don't usually, as editors, we do a lot of editing, but we don't usually work on poor English. We will make some adjustments, but we won't work on poor English. We just haven't got the time to do it.
And if I could just add one more thing in addition to that, I think one of the problem with a lot of colleagues, or a lot of papers which come from non-English speaking countries, or people who speak English as their second or third language, is the way English is written is different, and perhaps is a combination of British, American, and Australian, or whatever kind of English. Especially in the context of Pakistan. So sometimes it's even very difficult, even if you want to try and help and improve English, that becomes very, very hard. So I think that needs to be dealt with. And that's the reason that I always suggest that please try and read as much as you can. The other thing which people can do is there are quite a lot of software, for example, Grammarly and Ginger and some of the other softwares, which are actually really good. And you can set up your Microsoft Word or whatever word processor you're using, English to one particular type of English. It's okay if you want to use American English or British English, but as long as you consistently use one language, because the spellings are different, how things are, sentences are phrased different. If you use one way of doing it, that's completely fine, because then you can do something around it. But the problem arises when you have used 2 or 3 different systems, 2 or 3 different types of spellings, different types of English, then it just becomes a complete new language in its own right, which only you who has written can understand and nobody else can. And that brings up the importance of reading. generally and reading around the topic that you're working on. Okay, so other questions, please?
Someone waved earlier. I think it was Shazad waved to ask a question. Someone did.
Yeah, Shahzad Anayat is here. If you can give me a chance, please. I would like to ask the question from Ehtisham. I'm working as assistant professor at ISRA College of Nursing, Islamabad, ISRA University. My question from Ehtisham is being part of one of the a course that has been offered by one of the university, medical university, and the course duration is 6 months is actually, and it's the introduction to research course, and the requirement for certification is to publish one of the paper. After publishing the paper, you would be able to, or the participants would be able to get the certification. Sham, how you would comment about this?
Okay. I'm going to put mute all for everyone, and Ehtisham, you can unmute yourself. Ehtisham, you can unmute yourself.
That's a really good question, and I think I'm not really in favor of that sort of thing. Like if you're taking a 6 months course and like the requirement is to publish a paper, at the end it's just like publication for the sake of publication. You really didn't put the effort into the study, because if immediately after the course you need to like publish, I don't know if that's gonna work out. Because like usually quality research and rigorous research takes a lot of time. So you can't expect people to like publish after 6 months of like a writing course. I don't know. To me, that just doesn't sound right. Maybe others could like shed some light on that question too.
I will like Professor Watson. What do you think? And then I'll say.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like these programs where you're obliged to have published a paper. I think it's all very well to prepare a manuscript, but there's no guarantee that you'll get published in any particular time or get accepted. It's very capricious. And I know that there's a similar pressure, as you said, when people are going for promotion. That I get letters regularly for both journals. My promotion is coming up. I must publish this within the next month, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about that. We've no fast tracking and whatever. So it's a similar thing. There's just no guarantees of getting published. So I think that programs which require you to have published a paper, they're well-meaning. I can see why they're trying to do it, but I think it's a.
You're mute, Roger.
Yeah, I'm finished.
Yeah. Okay. And I completely agree. I think sometimes when there are writing related courses in which they might say that, one of the expectations is by the end of the course, you may be able to, or you should be able to publish. But I guess if it's a research paper, that's very, very difficult. But then the research writing or the publication in scholarly journal is not the only one way of publishing. I think authors also need to remember other ways of publishing, for example, blogs, for example, other various bits which can help. And I think it is important for, as an academic, if you would like to write, I have learned that from Roger, that, if you want to write it for different audience and write it for different, not only audience, but for different sort of, what's the word, avenues, sort of places. So to learn your ability to write better. Okay, so Dr. Azina is asking questions. Many nursing journals accept tertiary care articles. Any journal in nursing field favorable for population health research? Any suggestion? Roger, do you want to answer that question?
Yes. Asking about particular kinds of studies, yes?
Yeah, so question is, many nursing journals accept tertiary care articles. Any nursing journals in the field of nursing which are favorable for population health research?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Well, I mean, Journal of Advanced Nursing will take these. We don't actually get enough of them, but the specific journals within the Wiley stable, which is the one I know best, are the Public Health Nursing, which would be relevant, and also the International Nursing Review, which is widely published, but it belongs to the International Council of Nurses, and they really like to deal with international issues, particularly if there's a policy perspective. So I think those would be the two big ones.
Yeah, and as you've said, our journal also Nursing Open,
Yeah.
or any of them, we don't necessarily, as long as, I think one thing which is important for Jan as well as any nursing journals, if you want to apply for, it's not necessarily the topic, but it is about the implications for nurses and nursing, and why that is important. If that's been made clear, I think most journals related to nursing would consider that. Okay, any other questions that people may have?
Dr. Parveen, I think Ms. Asma has asked a question regarding publications in 2018.
Asma, would you like to ask the question, or would you like to write it again, please? So while Asma is coming back, one thing which I was hoping we can clarify in terms of one of the things which happens not only with colleagues in Pakistan, but all across the world, even in the UK, is about when should they contact, or how should they wait, how long should they wait for the peer review process. People seem to, again, it relates to predatory publishing up to a certain extent, because people want to publish soon. And despite the fact that journals usually say 8 to 12 weeks, but sometimes it can take longer, and people don't want to wait that long. So what is your advice, Roger? How long on average most journals would take, and how long should people be prepared to wait before they actually contact editors or do something around it?
Yeah, good. Well, it's the same questions wherever I go, but they're good questions, and this is one which is hard to answer. I think it's worth looking to see on the journal web page, or by contacting the editorial office, ask them what their performance indicator is for turning manuscripts around. And I think if they don't meet that performance indicator, then I think you're entitled to ask them. For example, if Journal of Advanced Nursing, I think we now say something like 6 weeks before you get a decision, and we give reviewers 4 weeks to give us a decision. That's an average. So obviously there's a standard deviation around that, which is quite wide, but that's the average. But if the journal advertises, say, 6 weeks before you get an answer, I would say maybe wait a week beyond that, and then ask them what the progress is with your article. But it's a really difficult issue, because there's nothing we can do to speed it up, really, apart from trying to put pressure on our reviewers, and that's very, very difficult. And I think that we do what we can. And a good journal, and I consider the Journal of Advanced Nursing to be good because we're well staffed, we will keep you informed if it goes beyond that time. We have flags to tell you it's gone beyond that time. We don't have Nursing Open because we don't have the staff to do that. We will tell you, and we will tell you if there are delays. Having said all that, just a final word on that, you should never, ever be in a position of having to get a paper published. If you needed to get a paper published tomorrow, you should have submitted it yesterday. It should have been done earlier. You've got to appreciate that journals can't help. And also, I think employers shouldn't be putting that sort of pressure on people anyway. So it's a difficult issue, one I appreciate, but one that we can't help much with, except making you aware of what our normal turnaround times are.
And I think it also depends on the topic as well. So Roger has mentioned from the perspective of from the journals that we edit and we deal with, but we both have been in position where one of our paper is in publication process for more than a year now, even more than that. And it all depends on if they can find peer reviewers in time, and there are many different other factors in relation to that. So while most journals take that much time, as Roger have said, sometimes it can be much longer than that, which means that you by all means can follow up and ask questions. But I think the reason for raising this question was that there is no way you can get publications done quickly in 2 days or 3 days time. So we just need to be mindful of that, if that's possible. Okay. Questions, can you please suggest any journal in the field of nursing philosophy for my academic work on nursing philosophy course in PhD, such as philosophical essay, concept analysis, etc.? Okay, who is that? Asmat Kainat. Okay. Asmat, I think it depends on the topic that you or you know what the your article is about. There are some journals. I think nursing philosophy is one as well, isn't it? Which you can look for, and I think it depends on what topic you have written. And there are many nursing journals who probably would cater to the topic, but I guess it's you have to see not necessarily that is it about nursing philosophy, is it about something a particular topic and philosophy. So there are different things that you can judge, and also other things. For example, if you were going to go for Journal of Advanced Nursing, that probably doesn't take discussion or paper. I'll let Roger answer that question, but you know, read the journal guidelines and it will tell you what type of paper do they accept. Ehtisham, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think some of the like nursing philosophy is published by Wiley. That's one of the journal. But if you're looking at concept analysis and discussion papers around philosophical issues in nursing, then you could also go for Advances in Nursing Science, which is published by Walters Kluwer, and Nursing Science Quarterly, which is published by Sage. So these are the three journals which publish like content related to nursing philosophy or concept analysis or any issue surrounding nursing theories.
Okay, so Nursing Inquiry is one which someone suggested. My chat box is not moving, so I'm not sure who.
That was me, Parveen, Nursing Inquiry. It's also a Wiley journal, but you're right, Nursing Philosophy and Nursing Inquiry, both Wiley, and the other ones that were suggested by Eunice are good ones too. Somebody mentioned concept analysis. The journals are getting a little bit reluctant to take them these days, I have to say, because they don't add much to the database. I would check if you have a concept analysis that the journal will specifically take them.
Okay, so another question was about are we doing any I forgot where this was, but there was some, can you guide us for any kind of publication course? Humaira, can you explain your answer? There are publication workshops which many people do, like Roger does publication workshops as well. And I think there must be other courses. I'll let Roger answer that question, but what is your question? Are there any good publication courses, Roger, which people can do?
Hello, yes, I was just, my computer's very slow because there's so many people on Zoom around where I stay at the moment. Yes, I mean, obviously, I'll do them. Parveen and I will do them if you invite us to come and do them. But I think I can't think of any specific ones. But for example, I have a YouTube channel with a specific set of publication slides on them about ethics and publication and how to write and things like that. And there are companies who will do these things. Inago is very, very good. They're very aware of predatory publishers as well. But the company Inago, and I've actually made a lot of videos for them on different aspects of publication. So they're worth checking. They do have some free content, but the rest of the content you do have to sign up for and pay. But that to me, they would, I think they're based in India and the States and the Far East. And I think they're probably one of the foremost companies in offering advice about writing for publication. ENAGO, Inago. If I can find my YouTube channel link, I'll paste it in here.
Okay, thank you. Safi, you wanted to ask a question from Ehtisham, so if you could unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, Mr. Ehtisham. I have a question from you that people who write an article and they publish in Pakistani categories, you know, XYZ categories, and there are also some categories from the Thomson Reuters. So, but the people get confused, and especially me, that what to do if I publish it in Pakistani journals and leave that Thomson Reuters, you know, impact factor journals. So what is the best way and which is most beneficial for us to publish an article, please?
Okay, that's a really good question, because like there is not an issue of predatory or legitimate publishers here, but it's the issue of national published journals and international journals. So before I could make a decision of like going on to publish in an HEC-based journals or like Thomson Reuters ranked journals, I think you would have to consider two things. Is your paper geared towards your national audience? If it's geared towards national audience, then I would go with an HEC-based journal. But if it's like an international journal and like if the topic is relevant for international audience, then I would go for an international journal. And then obviously like the issue comes with your employer to, if they want you to publish in an I have seen that a lot of times, like some of the people, they want their researchers to publish in HE-based journals, because like then they could have actually like they could get the promotion. But if you're looking for an international journals and they asked you to publish in a high impact journal, then you should go for Thomson Reuters. I think others, or Dr. Watson or Dr. Parveen, could like share some more on this.
I think this is the kind of question with perhaps Roger must have dealt with in many different countries where he does writing for workshop courses. So I would be interested to see what he has to say.
Parveen, can you just summarize the question, please?
So the question was that should people be publishing their articles in the national journals or the international ones?
Oh, right. Okay. That is a good question. I think it depends what you want to achieve and which audience you want to reach, and whether or not your your employer has a requirement for you to publish in impact factor journals, because the impact factor journals tend to be international, either based in the United States or in Europe, some in Australia, the English-speaking world. So some of the national journals don't have impact factors. So I think it really depends what you want to achieve. That's all I can say. If you have a requirement to publish in an impact factor journal, then you need to publish internationally. If you want to reach a local audience and make sure that they are reached, then probably locally could be better. But my feeling is that anything that's published online, it doesn't matter where it's published, you can promote that using social media to reach whichever audience you want, even if it's local. It doesn't really matter. And the other consideration is language. You know, if you publish in English, it may not reach everyone linguistically across Pakistan, although that's maybe not a very good example because English is widely spoken, but in some countries you won't reach everyone. So you may want to publish in a local language and to publish internationally. And just as a matter of interest, most publishers will allow you to do that. They'll allow you to publish a local language version and an English version, provided you check with both publishers that they're happy with that. So there's not a clear answer to that one, Parveen. It's just it really depends on priorities.
I think both of you have given important points. Sarfraz, do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think so. It depends. For example, just like Dr. Arjuna has also mentioned in the Pakistan issue, there's in Pakistan there's the issue that few journal has impact factor. That's why I think so. It depends on the. For example, in Pakistan, HEC, according to HEC, we should go for the X and Y category. So these are the acceptable in Pakistan level. However, if we go for the international, it depends on the topic and the scope of the journals. So it can be published. It could be. I will advise for go for the publication if there's a question, just like I was mentioning my guideline. If there's something new, it's a hard topic of the day. It means this is a current topic and the solution of the major problem in the research. This we should go for the international journal. Otherwise, better to go for the local journals.
Okay, I'm just going to add one more thing, and perhaps Dr. Rosina may have something else to add in here. For me, I think all important points have been mentioned, but if you are choosing a national journal because of the issues around language, I mean, in Pakistan, the nursing related aspects of medicine or anything, academia, regardless of which language, is usually published in English. And I don't see any reason why would somebody write with, why would you choose, if you choose a national journal because you think the quality of English is not good and it's not going to be published outside, and therefore you publish in national journal, I think that's where the problem is. And quite a lot of journals which are published, and how the kind of the stuff is being published there is questioned. So I think it's about the quality of the journal that you have to see and the message that you want to see, and do not compromise on any of those things. If the message is important nationally, just do that. But most international journals would accept pretty much studies coming from anywhere, so I don't think that's really a problem. It's usually about how it is written and what you are writing. And at the same time, it is important that we improve the quality of journals within the country, nationally, in any country, and make sure that if we are publishing in English, then it should be written properly. It is like any other language, that if we are speaking Sindhi or Urdu or whatever language, we should try and, when it comes to writing, we should try and write properly. And I think that's what matters. So I think there are two issues with that. Dr. Azina, did you have anything else to add here?
Parveen, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think you covered well that the reason should not be that the language is of low quality or the research is of low quality. And because of lowering the quality, we put it in the national journal. The quality should be of the same, but the relevance to the country is a different issue. Unfortunately, as I wrote also on the chat, that we don't have many journals in nursing or generally in Pakistan related to public health and other fields, and therefore the national canvas and the scope is very limited for journals. But like you mentioned earlier, there can be other mediums, like newspaper is very popular, blogs are very popular, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, these are all other mediums for you to write. But in terms of the country journals, we need to pull up quite a lot in Pakistan.
Thank you. One more question which a couple of people have asked about writing from their master's thesis or their dissertation, that how can they do it? I think this is a good question, and you can use, or you can base your article on your master's or whatever dissertation that you're doing. But one of the things that we encounter, which I have seen regularly, and I'm sure others may have seen as well, is that when students or when people try and convert the whole of their thesis into a journal article or just copy and paste it, it doesn't work like that, because you're writing for a different audience, and it just becomes a completely, so many students or many people just think that once they've written, they can just copy and paste and send it and it's going to publish, and then they get worried and upset when it's not accepted for publication or rejected from different places. And usually journals wouldn't really tell you specifically that it is rejected, because sometimes editors do, sometimes they don't. But I think it is important to remember that you're writing for a different audience, and therefore you need to write it differently. So one advice always is to select your journal first and then write it for them. So again, if you have written for your master's thesis, dissertation, or whatever that is, select the journal where you want to aim for, and then rewrite the information for that particular journal. You may be able to copy and paste few bits, but I'm sure, and I can guarantee you, that you will have to rewrite most of it anyway. Does anyone else would like to add anything? Sarfraz, Roger, Ehtisham?
Yeah, just to say, I agree entirely. Sadly, you have to start again. Put the thesis or the dissertation away from you. Think what you want to write within what the guidance for the journal is, and write that. Of course, you can pool the results and things like that in, but if you are cutting and pasting, one of the dangers is that you leave in phrases like "in this dissertation," "in this thesis," so you've got to get those out. But you can publish. I would say that you should feel obliged to publish from your thesis or your dissertation. You should try to do it if at all possible.
I think another way to address this is like you could publish multiple manuscripts from a dissertation. It could be one focus on the practice implication, one could be written like from a methodological perspective, and another could be from like the lit review. Like for instance, if you're doing a mixed method study, you could take the lit review and submit as an integrative review if you actually did an integrative review, or if you did a scoping review. So you could publish as a scoping review. The second paper could be about your full mixed method study, if you had additional finding coming from the qualitative phase, you could take the qualitative phase and submit it as like additional research results taken from your qualitative study. And you could even publish a methodological paper if you did use an interesting data analysis technique, or you used an interesting like data integration phase. You could publish that as well. So you could still publish a lot of papers out of it. You don't have to just take the whole thesis and submit it to a journal. I've read, there is an excellent website called Nurse, Author, and Editor. So if you read that website, it's actually a journal. Some of the editors have shared their concerns, like sometimes they get full-fledged dissertations as manuscript and people ask them to publish the whole dissertation. It doesn't work that way. And I'm probably sure like Dr. Parveen and Dr. Watson could actually tell a lot about that too.
Sarfraz, do you have to add anything? And then we've got a few minutes and we've got a couple more questions, and I think next 10 minutes we should end.
Yeah. In Pakistani context, what I observed, people feel difficulty in the first publication from the thesis. So my advice is that, so at least they should select the journal from the article that they have cited, pick those journals and write the manuscript, at least one manuscript, they can be published. Then the motivation will be there. They can list more, they can, write more publications, just like Ehtesham and you guys are suggesting. So my advice, to please refer the article that has been cited, pick those journals and write one manuscript that should be published.
Okay, great. Adnan Noor, Adnan, would you like to ask your questions, what you have written? You've got a very interesting question, or shall I just read it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Parveen. I am the Dean of Sciences and the Chair of Computer Science, Bean, and in Information Technology University. So what I'm asking is from the context of computer science. In this field, I've seen that the inclusion of authorship has been changed, and now we are observing that people whose contributions are small to none, actually, they are becoming part of the publication. The reasons could be many. I'm not going to the reasons, but I'm just wondering how the people in advanced countries are looking into this issue, because this is leading to a publication race, actually. And the number of publications I have seen and actually counted, in some cases, it is every publication after a publication after every 2 weeks, which is incredible for the last maybe 10 to 12, 15 years. I mean, in a mid-career, you're having 1,000 publications. I've seen such cases. So I'm just wondering how the people in, the countries, how the decision, or how the people are thinking. So that's my question.
So how should the decision about authorship should be made, and also how good is it to publish with a big group of authors? And I also have a question in relation to that, and I think Roger would be able to answer these all together, hopefully. Is that there is this thing about when people think that if you want to include someone specific, so for example your supervisor or the head of the department or someone in power in the institution, do they automatically have the authorship in your paper? And is your paper most likely to get published if you have got, like for example, if I've got a name, if I write with Professor Roger Watson or with Dr. Zina Karmiliani, am I likely to get it published easily or not?
Is that for me, Parveen?
Yes, okay, all of these are for you.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, last one first. If you submit a paper with my name on it, you're probably more likely to get rejected these days. But never mind. I'm very, very proud to say that my own journals, both of them, have rejected my paper. So that's a mark of quality. The trend towards, there's 3 questions there. The trend towards big authorship is a difficult one because in some fields, and you mentioned computer science, and certainly in physics, I mean, there are papers in physics with more than 1,000 authors on them, which has to be ridiculous. I mean, it just has to be. But in other fields, there don't seem to be any standards about authorship. However, within medicine and nursing and a lot of social sciences fall within medicine, we follow the ICMJE guidance, the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, and it's easy to find on the internet. And I think that other disciplines could have a look at that and adopt it, because it makes the criteria for authorship very clear. Have you taken part in the study design? Have you taken part in the data collection or analysis? And have you taken part in writing up the paper? And those are ORs. You don't have to do all of those, but everyone who is named on the paper has to have read and approved the final manuscript, and everyone who's on the paper is equally liable if there are any ethical concerns afterwards. So that's why you should be careful about putting your name on papers or inviting too many people. So I don't have an answer to the question as to how you deal with it in computer science, but there are potential guidelines there. It doesn't turn editors' heads towards papers if they happen to have somebody prestigious on them or a head of school. And head of schools and deans and professors are not entitled simply to have their name on papers that come out of their organization simply for being there. They have to make a contribution. But we can't really police that. All we can do is deal with issues afterwards. And there are lots of these issues. As an editor, I'm always dealing with authorship issues. Then I think the other question was the race to publication. I wish we could do something about that. And I suppose I'm as responsible editing not 2 but 3 journals as anyone. But I think there are far too many publications out there. I think there are far too many journals. There's far too much low quality work. And I think in the, I suppose by developed countries, you mean the UK and USA and some European countries, I think there are differences. I think in the UK, we don't really have this pressure to publish a great deal, but in some parts of Europe, there's a huge amount of pressure to publish and to publish in particular journals. And in a country like China, there's enormous pressure to publish. That's all that they're interested in. It's not their fault. It's government policy reflected in university policy, reflected in departmental faculty policies. And at some point, I think the international academic community has to get together and rebel against this and kind of stop it happening. But it's a very difficult one to stop. So I don't have an answer.
Okay, Shanila is asking a question about how many years after authoring. I think what she means is how many years are when can you publish from something? When is it old? Is that right, Shanila?
Yeah. Well, the most publishers, I know that Elsevier and Wiley, who are the big ones in the field, my field, say 5 years. It's arbitrary, but that's the usual cutoff. There has to be some cutoff, otherwise people would wait too long. However, you can do secondary analysis and justify that, but you have to justify it.
So I'll ask one question, and then Wasim Ahmed Khan would like to ask a question. So my question, again, sorry to put you on the spot, is about, but I think this is one of the questions which many people have, and I did ask in our last workshop from you as well, which we did for Sigma. There are, people think that PhD supervisors, there's divided opinion about this. Some students think that PhD supervisors cannot be authors on the manuscripts. So, I would like you to deal with the issues of, do PhD supervisors play a role in research in PhD or master's dissertation? And are they, should they be authors on the manuscript? Should they be authors, and which place, first or second, what is the right place for them?
Okay, this is a controversial question which has caused arguments in both of my recent universities. I think that a PhD supervisor should never be the first author. It should always be the student, unless perhaps the student's left and hasn't done any of the work, but I still think the PhD supervisor should be generous. I think, and I've argued in print with one of my other editorial colleagues, that PhD supervisors are not only entitled to be authors, they are obliged to be authors, because they have to stand up and take responsibility for work that they have helped to design, supervise, execute, and write up. So I think there's an obligation there. However, if a PhD supervisor isn't entitled to be on a paper because they've made no contribution to the project or ignored their student for the 3 or 4 years, then I think that's a question of disciplining the supervisor by the university if they've done that. That's a different issue altogether. but I do think there's a strong case for PhD supervisors being on the paper, an obligation, in fact, and more than that, they should be there, but they shouldn't be first.
Okay, great. Have I missed anyone else's question somehow? If I have missed, can you please write in the chat box? Okay, and Wasim Ahmed Khan, you wanted to, okay, just a sec. Dr. Rosina says, within 3 to 5 years, primary data get old. At AKU, we suggest second or last author if worked throughout. If students do not publish for 3 to 5, then supervisors can. Well, I think we just need to add, so I'll stop my question. But Wasim Ahmed Khan wanted to say something, so Wasim, please do.
Ji, hello, good afternoon. I'm from London, and I don't know, someone is good morning or good night. And thank you, Dr. Parveen Ali. It is a great effort, and really I appreciate, and I know you very long time, and I know you are doing a lot of initiatives, and this is one of that, and I'm very glad you started, and I learned a lot of things, even though I am a nurse for more than 32 years. And I'm glad to associate with Aga Khan University and many other universities. But last time when you have your session regarding the PhD, I was watched and then I listened. Then I get very much clear with the Dr. Rosina talk that I am not for PhD. I done enough. I don't need anyone. Pupil is more than 25 years calling me doctor without degree. I'm correcting them. I don't have degree, but they said, no, we would like to call you Dr. Wasim. But anyhow, thank you very much, Rosina. That's compliment. And the last thing, Roger, from today, your talk is motivated me to start publication because I am the founder of APNA, All Pakistan Nurses Association in 2004. And I was very active member of Pakistan Nurses Federation when I was in Pakistan. Last 21 years, I was in UK as Parveen, but we have very close associations. And we are going to start publication because I have one experience with our previous doctor. She done PhD, nurse doctor. Sadly, she passed away a few years ago. Dr. Anwar Aziz. And we done publication and both sides we covered. Left side we covered from the English and right side we covered few pages from in the Urdu, and it was very popular, and I need to start again. Thank you, Roger, and thank you everyone who attended this course or the webinar.
Okay, thank you ever so much, Wasim, and thank you everybody for attending. Last thing which I would like to say, one thing which I have learned, I've worked with Roger for more than 10 years now, and
my hair used to be black.
Sorry?
My hair used to be black before I started working.
No, they weren't. So, and one thing is important for us as become seniors to tell our colleagues and students about rejections as well. When I was kind of, growing up in nursing and publication, and within the last 10 years, there was no one who could tell you, or the information was not like these days. There were not many people who would share information, who would tell you what it is all about, and it was difficult. We didn't know that rejection is a thing, and I learned this. I mean, there have been many instances when Roger has actually showed me manuscripts that, look, people get rejected. Look, this is an article which is mine, I have submitted, and it has got rejected. So I think it is important to share that kind of information with others, because otherwise it can create a sense of failure among people, thinking it's only me who gets rejected. So I think it's important to understand that everyone gets rejected. It's part of the process, and how do you deal with rejection is something that we all need to learn. So as we grow in our profession, as we develop in our profession, we have got the responsibility to help those juniors than us to learn all that, and to develop them and help others as they progress as well. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope we have answered everyone's questions, and I hope you have found the session useful. You have got Roger's email, you've got my email address, and if you have got questions for any of us, or Sarfraz or Ehtisham, just write it to us, and we'll try and answer your questions as much as we can. We will post the video on the YouTube as well as Facebook links and in the WhatsApp group that I have. So if you just go through the videos and share with others who have not been able to watch that, and if any questions, just do get back to us. Thank you very much, everybody. And would it be okay if we just take a photo of all? So if we can switch our cameras on, it will be useful to get a photo if everyone is okay with that. And Dr. Rosina has told me this last time, so I'm going to use that opportunity to take photo with everyone. Can we do that, please? So if you switch your cameras on. I'll just get 1 more minute so people can switch on their cameras. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I will try and take the screenshot. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot for your time, and I hope it was useful.
Thank you, Dr. Parveen and all. Thank you, Rogers.
Do we want to have a chat, Ehtisham, Sarfaraz?
Sure.
And Roger?
Yeah, I'll stay on for a few minutes. Yeah, I need to go and get some lunch, but I'll stay on if you want to catch up afterwards. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Or I can call you on the WhatsApp group, all 4 of us.
Right.
Okay, sure.
Thank
Thanks.
you then.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye, everyone. Good morning, goodbye. Good night.